We are still on the uses of commas. When to use commas, part 5. If you are yet to watch part 1, 2, 3, and 4, do well to go watch them. Now let's look at the 5th use of commas. Use commas to mark off dependent clauses when they start sentences. Example 1. Here is the sentence. I will dry the pillow if it gets wet. Here is the second sentence. If the pillow gets wet, I will dry it. Let's start with the first sentence. I will dry the pillow if it gets wet. This particular sentence begins with an independent clause, which is I will dry the pillow, then followed by a dependent clause, which is if it gets wet. This is a complex sentence. So when you begin a complex sentence with an independent clause followed by a dependent clause, you don't put a comma to separate the independent clause from the dependent clause. But if the sentence begins with a dependent clause like you have here, if the pillow gets wet, I will dry it. You are expected to use a comma to mark off the dependent clause like this. If the pillow gets wet, I will dry. The comma should be here. That was a mistake. So that we have, if the pillow gets wet, comma, I will dry it. And that is what we have here. It says, use commas to mark off dependent clauses when they start sentences. All right, let's have example 2. Here is the sentence. After he had finished the house chores, he could have taken his bath, but he didn't. We have that after he had finished the house chores. This is a dependent clause. It doesn't make complete sense. Let's look at the second one. He could have taken his bath. This one is an independent clause. It makes complete sense of its own. So we have a sentence that begins with a dependent clause after he had finished the house chores. So what do? We use comma to mark it off. Before you now see the independent clause, he could have taken his bath. But I hope you know why there is a comma here before the but he didn't. Remember in part 3, I told you that when a conjunction links two independent clauses, you should use a comma to mark off the first independent clause before the conjunction. He could have taken his bath is an independent clause. He didn't is another independent clause. Both independent clauses are linked by the conjunction but, hence there is a comma here. All right, let's look at the final example under part 5. Unless you apologize, he won't speak to you again. This first part, unless you apologize, is an incomplete statement. It doesn't make a complete sense because it is a dependent clause. So we have a sentence that begins with a dependent clause. He won't speak to you again is an independent clause. So what do? We use a comma to mark off the dependent clause. Unless you apologize. So we have, unless you apologize, he won't speak to you again. Do you understand? Kindly watch out for the final part, part 6. Thank you very much for watching.